Thank you for being here with us today on our To Live For. And you're one of the most humble people that I know, especially as a man. And yet you're one of the greatest humanitarians that
Wow,
I've had the privilege of knowing.
thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for all you do for so many. And I want to talk more about that and share with our audience what you do. I'd love to go back to your childhood and if you feel comfortable to share the story when it was time for you to leave home and the choices that you made to maybe it was a road less traveled, the choice that you made with the option that your dad gave you and what decision and how that was that an illuminating point in your life and did that impact the rest of your life, that decision that you made?
I think in order to understand it, that I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a white man, and therefore in an environment of extraordinary privilege, unbelievable privilege. You cannot imagine how privileged a white man was in apartheid South Africa. 90% of the population was forbidden by law to compete on any kind of level playing field. So it wasn't difficult to be successful if you were a white man in South Africa. As a youth, I was in a Jesuit boarding school, and we weren't taught racism per se. We were taught paternalism. In other words, they were saying, these black people are not bad, but they're not like us. They're not as smart as we are. They need us to take care of them. That kind of paternalism. Uh, and I, growing up, knew no different. The only interaction I had with people of color, they were servants. Uh, and I knew absolutely no different. Uh, and my father was somewhat racist. He loved South Africa, apartheid South Africa, but I knew nothing else. So when I when I was leaving school, my father, who was nouveau riche, a white male in South Africa, he went to South Africa and made a lot of money. How could he not have made a lot of money, given the playing field that he was on? And he gave me three choices: my son the doctor, my son the lawyer, or my son the priest. Those were the choices that he gave me, and I was not interested in any of those choices. I wanted to be my son, the wandering minstrel, a musician, and he actually he called me into his office. He gave me $1,000, which in 1963 was a lot of money, and he kicked me out of his office, and he didn't talk to me for 15 years. And I went on my way, and as a musician, and I started playing music, and I wanted to play with the best musicians, and guess who they were? And they were black guys, and so I started playing, and it was an epiphany without question, because I realized these guys were exactly like me. They had the same love of family, the same dreams, the same everything. The only difference was they played better than I did, but other than that, they were very much like me. So it was quite a revelation, in fact, for me as a young man.
From what you grew up
Right.
in
It's not,
the early days.
and it definitely changed me, in how I approached the way I lived my life in South Africa.
Where do you think that came from, your courage to be different than how you were raised?
Well, I don't know if courage is the right word. I mean, it just was. I mean, it just didn't make sense for me to be any other way than the way I am.
You knew you didn't want to be a doctor, a
I
lawyer,
knew I didn't
or
want
a
to be that, and I
priest.
went into business, and I was successful in business in South Africa, very successful. But then, how could I not have been? Again, I was, this extraordinary privilege that was bestowed upon me simply because I was white and male. So it was a very male-dominated society, and
But you quickly learned that other people of other so-called races, that there really isn't a difference beyond the color of the skin.
exactly. Well, South Africa was so complex. It was such a complicated. There were so many laws forbidding you to do things. For example, unions, white unions were encouraged. It was a good thing to allow white people the advantage of collective bargaining. Black unions were forbidden by law. It was a major crime to even discuss it, and you were labeled a communist if you even thought union among black people. And what I did in one of my companies, I made all of my black staff shareholders of the company, which effectively gave them the right to collective bargaining, but also got me into a lot of trouble with the South African government.
Wow.
So, but that wasn't a question of, it's not a question of courage, it's a question of doing the right thing, I mean, Indrani, my wife, I married Indrani, she's Indian. Again, she was born in South Africa. She had absolutely no rights. She had no right to vote. She had no right to own property. She had no right to walk in the streets that she was born on after 10 o'clock at night. And we opened a restaurant together. She was a shareholder. And it was the first restaurant in Natal that opened its doors to all races. And we also had a theater and an art gallery.
And that was your restaurant that you started?
Yes, it was called the Hungry Hermit.
Wow.
And the Hermit Theater. And we not only for the patrons, but also the actors and actresses and musicians who played were also all races. It had never been done before. It was completely against the law, and we had lots of hassles. But it was very successful, and we did a lot of really good stuff.
Wow. Paved the way.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of others. It wasn't, there were not every white person in South Africa was a racist. That's just not true. I mean, there are a lot of people. Unfortunately, what happens in that environment, what normally happens, you take Nazi Germany. I mean, what they said, it wasn't my fault. I had no choice. The law said I was going to get into trouble. I mean, so I didn't participate, is what people said. And a lot of South Africans took it. Even though they weren't actively racist, they also didn't do anything to change it, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Those who did tended to get into trouble.
Like you said, it's just not so much courage, but doing the right thing. But it still can take courage to do the right thing when you're letting go of possible future stability for your life. Were you worried about that at all?
I mean, there were consequences. I lost all my government contracts in one of my business. So, that was a financial consequence.
But you're still glad you did.
Absolutely.
Right. And then when did you move here, and when did you start doing
what happened,
humanitarian work?
Indrani got pregnant. We weren't married because we couldn't get married. And we decided that we wanted the baby to be born in the United States. I was a U.S. citizen. I was born a U.S. citizen, even though I never lived in America. I was born in the Panama Canal Zone during the Second World War, and I was a U.S. citizen. So we wanted our son to be born here. So Indrani came out here. And
by herself?
Yes.
At first?
She spent 4 months here because she had to come before she showed. Wow. And then the baby was born, and on December 6th, and we went to South Africa on New Year's Eve, 25 days later. And when we arrived in South Africa, Indrani went through the entrance for non-white people, and Zach and I went through the passport control for white people, pretending we didn't know each other. And then we lived inside, but that was the turning point, because that's the point at which Indrani started becoming fearful because of our child. And then we started making plans to leave South Africa. And that was a mission, because you weren't allowed. You could leave South Africa, but you couldn't take any of your assets, any of your money, anything that you had with you. So we spent 2 years smuggling money and things out of South Africa so that we could start a new life here. And then we came here in 1985.
And then, when did you get involved with the Rotary?
Shortly afterwards, Rotary, I have to say Rotary is a fantastic organization. It really is an extraordinary organization. And I'll tell you why. It is apolitical, it is secular, it has no agenda other than to help build world peace and understanding using service as a vehicle to accomplish that goal. End of story. Nothing else. And in addition to that, and what really appeals to me about Rotary, is that you can bring your own agenda to the table. If it falls within the parameters of the grant monies that they give out, they will support you. And so for me, it was a perfect vehicle. I wanted to help in South Africa. I wanted to give something back. And it allowed me to access a great deal more money than I would have been able to do on my own. A great deal more. Because
you've been a leader here in our community and in Africa, making amazing things happen.
It's a joint effort. For me to take credit for any of that is nonsense, because it takes my whole club. We're a very small club, 18 people, but we've raised in South Africa alone over $1 million for an HIV AIDS project. Yes, which is amazing, but that wasn't me. I was like a cheerleader. I would, because I'm from South Africa and I speak the language. I know what's going on. I go there a lot. But in order to make all those extraordinary projects that we've developed in South Africa happen, it required the participation of all of my club members and the support of Rotary International. And that's really where we came, because we wrote big grants, $200,000 grant. And that money came from Rotary International.
So what are some of the favorite projects that you've participated in and or led?
They're all my favorites. But, the biggest one we did was they needed a palliative care center at the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis. There were no antiretrovirals. The government, in fact, had said HIV didn't cause AIDS, so they didn't need to do any preparation. Then there was no preparation. I had a meeting at St. Mary's Hospital, and a little German nun, Sister Regina Bachmann, her name was. She was about 4'10", little tiny woman. I called her Attila the Nun. She was the toughest woman I've ever met in my life. And she looked at me and she said, "We need a palliative care center for end-of-life care, but more importantly to train community outreach workers, because we are going to need hundreds to support the thousands of people who are going to die of this disease in the near future." Those were her exact words. And I came back to my club. We were a small club. We had $27.15 in our petty cash, and I said, "We need $200,000." And to a person, they said, "Yeah, we can do it," and we did it. Wow. With the support of Rotary International, we had to write a grant. We had to raise $30,000, which we did, and the rest of the money came in the grant form from Rotary International. And that palliative care, it's only a 30-bed facility, and the average stay at that time in the palliative care was about 24 hours before they died. And
wow.
But the most important function of it was it trained these community outreach workers. Hundreds of them were trained and funded by other grants that we did. We bought their medical bags, their shoes, raincoats, all that kind of stuff to support them and pay for training. And at one stage there were 560 community outreach workers going out, seeing on an average of 5 people a day. So that, that was 2,500 people a day were getting
Wow.
treatment and care that they otherwise would not have been able to get. And that's thanks to the members of my Rotary Club with the support of Rotary International.
Amazing.
I had a very small part in that.
In what town is that?
It was in a place called Marion Hill, near Durban in South Africa.
Wow. And didn't you also build a orphanage or a
We didn't build an
playground?
orphanage, but we built a playground. We did water projects. We supported, there's an orphanage called Jabulani. And Jabulani in Zulu means place of joy. And it's just kind of a drop-in center, and there are, I don't know how many kids, lots of kids. And we wrote a grant. I think it was about $30,000. We bought sewing machines, and we trained the go-go's, the grandmothers who were taking care of these kids, how to make things in order to sell and make money. And actually, a very nice story about that. I went there after the grant had, been established. The sewing machines were in, but they didn't have any fabric, or they had very little fabric. It was very expensive. And I came back to the club and I said, we need to get fabric somehow for these people. And one of our Rotarians, a fellow named John Woolacott, who's a CPA in Brunswick, he said, well, I have a client who manufactures fabric in Italy. Maybe I can do something. And I'm in South Africa, and I get a call from this guy in Italy, and he says, well, where do I send the fabric? And I said, well, hang on a second. I need to know how much fabric. And he said, well, it's going to be a container load. I said, a container load? He said, yeah. I said, well, I need to organize the shipping costs and the clearing costs and all that. It's very expensive, probably around $6,000. He said, I'll pay for that. I'll pay at CIF. CIF means it paid to the door. And he did that, this Italian guy.
Wow.
And when the fabric arrived, it was high-end Italian cotton. There were overruns for people like Macy's and stuff. And it was an extraordinary amount of... and also, the nuns had said, oh, is there any sheets? We need sheets. And so I called him and I said, any sheeting material? He says, no, but I'll take some out and we'll put it in. And when it arrived in South Africa, I mean, these nuns were dancing in the square because it was really... And it was a lot of fabric. It lasted them years.
Wow.
It was worth, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And when...
What a gift.
Incredible.
And you made that happen.
No, I didn't make it happen. The guy in Italy made it happen.
Well,
and John Woolacott
I know,
made
but
it
it's
happen.
your connections and you make magical things happen.
I'm such a small part of that. And
That's a great story.
it's a fantastic story. When we came back, we said, we should really thank this guy, and I didn't even know him. So we made a little album, of photographs of the fabric and the ladies working and the uniforms they were making
That's
for children,
perfect.
and we sent it to this guy in Italy, and he sent a thank you note back with a check for $2,000 enclosed, saying, I hope this keeps me out of hell for 100 years. And to this day, I've never met the guy.
A $2,000 check?
Yes,
with
another
thank you
$2,000.
And the shipping really is that expensive?
To a container?
Wow.
Because you've got annual customs and clearing, and then shipping the container to the port, and from the port to the city. Yeah, it's expensive. It's very expensive.
Not easy to make these things happen.
No,
but you
it
keep
takes
making
money.
them happen.
Well, my club makes it happen.
And you and your lovely, beautiful wife, Indrani, you make a beautiful couple. And
Well, she looks good enough for both of us.
she is lovely. And so your store, how long have you had your store?
21 years.
21 years at the Tonti Mall.
Very much Indrani's store.
And called
She's
Indrani's.
She's the brains and the beauty. I'm the Sherpa.
Sherpa.
Yeah. I carry the load. But all the cerebral stuff is hers.
And you both go to Africa every
We do.
year.
We
and
do.
you bring back
We do.
hand-done goods that the African people, and you give back some of that profit.
Well, some of it is you know, programs that we have developed, or other Rotary. You know, interesting one, I was in Uganda last year, and there's a Rotary Club there called the Kajenzi Rotary Club. Best Rotary Club I've ever been to in my life. Incredible bunch of people. And of the many projects that they took us to, the one that I liked the most was they had a program in a prison, a woman's prison. And what they were doing is they were teaching the women crafts, skills, how to make things that they could sell instead of doing crime. And so they were providing all the materials and all the training. And when we were there, all these women, they were allowed to have their babies in prison with them. And they all came out and singing and dancing, and the guards were singing and dancing with them. And we had this big show. It was incredible. And I bought they were making these wonderful
unusual.
baskets. They said, what a great, you know, rather than punishing, you know, it was a rehab thing. I mean, they were trying to help them, and it was great.
That is great.
And they were making these amazing baskets. I bought all of them.
That's a great story.
And that was Kajenzi Rotary Club, great Rotary Club.
That's a great story. And so what are the programs that you've been involved in to help alleviate hunger?
We're here? Or in Africa?
Both.
Well, you know, I mean, the Jabulani that I mentioned earlier, my Rotary Club, when I go to South Africa, we usually raise a couple of $1,000 and I buy food for that orphanage. And it's and $2,000 in South Africa buys a lot of food.
So you load them up when you go.
We load them up. Probably lasts them 2 or 3 months, but it's a big help to them. And we do that every year.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
You're amazing.
No.
And you've done fundraisers with your awesome music that I love, your original
Thank you.
songs and guitar playing, and I love your music.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you put on different fundraising
I do.
events.
We do concerts. We do whatever, you know. But for me, it's a way of raising money, you know. So all the money that in my advanced years, all the money I make from music, I give to my Rotary Club.
Wow.
When I was in South Africa this year, I had two gigs that paid quite well, and I gave that money to a Rotary Club in South Africa for hunger programs.
Wow. And were those performances there? Or
They were
here?
there in South Africa.
And you gave all the proceeds
Sure.
to the...
Yeah, I do. I give all the money I make from music to that.
And what about all your hard work lobstering?
I keep that money.
Got to have something
It's
to
not
feed
very
the
much.
family. How many years have you been doing that?
25 maybe.
You have your own boat.
Yeah,
You're a hard worker too.
I am. But then most people, Americans are very hard workers. When it's hard work, we come down to the wharf, see some of these guys who are 10 years older than me still working. You know, in their 80s. It's amazing. I hope to be one of them.
Me too. Now, wasn't there an award? Do you remember? It was in Brunswick on the mall, and it was not the humanitarian award. It was something peace talks, peace. You and I were both nominated, and you won.
Oh, really?
And it was quite a long time ago. And
Yeah,
it
I
was,
remember, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And it was something
It was a peace,
something.
I can't even remember how they worded it.
for the community and the world.
It was nice, yeah.
And so, what are your words of wisdom for younger people and older people, how they can make the world a better place?
I don't know. I don't know that I have any words of wisdom. All I can do is try, for me, to do the right thing. That's all. You know, I think that we live in a very difficult time. You know, when I look at America, the problems of America, it's really sad. I mean, this is an extraordinarily wealthy country, and yet we have hungry people. We have homeless people. How is that possible? You know, really, how is it possible? Here in Brunswick, Mid-Coast Hunger Prevention, fantastic organization.
It is.
And they provide food for food insecure children. And there are hundreds of them in Harpswell, in Brunswick. So how is that possible?
And there's really plenty of food for everybody.
And there's and there's plenty of money. It's just all filtered into the hands of very few people. I mean, they talk about millionaires and billionaires in the same breath. To put it in perspective, 1 million seconds is about 3 weeks. 1 billion seconds is 23 years. Who needs more than 1 billion? And yet they all want more. The guy who's got 5 billion wants 6 billion. The guy who's got 8 billion wants 10 billion. And to do what with? You know, they're not all altruistic. Some are. I mean, Bill Gates, fantastic. Warren Buffett. But there are many who are not.
We can name a few.
Yes, yes. There's, I mean, these CEOs of these pharmaceutical companies. I mean, this one where they just put the price up of EpiPens, right, to $600. The CEO, that woman, she gets $17 million a year. She got that raise after they put the price up on that stuff. Now, does that make sense to you?
It's not right. It doesn't abide by your motto of how do you live.
It doesn't. It offends me. It really does. It's horrible.
Well, one of my favorite sayings is when I see you and when we go to say goodbye, you always say, tell everyone, give everyone you know my love. Right. And so you know a lot of people and you've influenced a lot of people, and even in your great humility, I think that you have touched and given hope and upliftment, body, mind, heart, spirit, soul of
you make me sound far better than I am.
So many people, and there's a whole ripple effect of your goodness and
I'm
you
part
doing
of
the right
I'm part
thing.
of a group that does good things. That's what I am. Just a piece of the puzzle.
Thank you for being part of the group and for being a great humanitarian. Thank you for all you do for our community and our world.
Thank you.